one time putting your strings on, you can buy both of them. Now, when do you have to go back for your other semesters of
So I've got one more final exam tomorrow, and then I'll be done for the summer. And then if I go back fall semester, if I don't get an internship anywhere, I think it's August 19th when I go back. So I've got some time off. I'm definitely gonna
I
enjoy
bet
that.
you're looking forward to that. Now, are you still trying to work too?
Do I?
Are you still trying to work too?
Yeah, I've been working and going to school.
Oh man, that's hard, son.
Yeah. It's about killed me.
It'll be worth it though. It'll be well worth it, Seth.
Yeah. I'm pumped for it. Did I move over there? Is he coming?
Well, no, come on over here first, because it's got pickup there.
Huh? We better play everything in C or we're gonna have a hard time. Do I? I love it. I love it. I'm not gonna lie though, there is some ways in that, like that one, it might just me being like just sensitive to it since I've had it for so long, but when it comes to like picking and stuff, I kind of like that one a little bit better, but that might have been before I got the new elixirs on my other one.
Yeah.
But that Epiphone, I didn't know it cost so much, like regular price, because he got his on damage. And when I found like what style of guitar that was, and I looked it up, it's like $800 regular price.
You take the old original Epiphone, they make now making a newer Epiphone.
So that's the older one that I got. That's good. And somebody told me they said that one might have been like kind of like that white color before, and it's aged. I don't think it's that old though. Do you?
I don't know if it's one of the Americans. It's probably
I'd have to
pretty
ask.
old,
I'd have to ask New about that because I didn't know. I just assumed it was like a newer one that he'd just got since it was. But the only defect it had was like right in here. And the rest of it. before I had like one of them beginner Johnson ones, and I was like, when I strummed that one for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh. And then the Blue Ridge after I got my elixirs, I was like, this is even better. But I was looking at like a BR 160. I like the little design they have on there. Mine's a little more original, but I still like that little thing it does right there. Yeah.
I think it's
The one right up here.
$1,500-$1,600.
Yeah, it was. What's cool is I have that picture of my guitar now, because like before I went like a few months before and looked at it, and I took a picture because I wanted to do research on it. I still have it on my phone from where I was like looking at it, and that's mine.
Good evening. How is everybody? Y'all ready to learn about dinosaurs? Take your hymn books out, turn to page 8. I love the blessed Savior divine. He brightens up this pathway of mine. From his dear side I'll never depart. I'll follow wheresoever he leads. My soul each day he tenderly feeds. I love the Lord deep down in my heart. I love the Lord deep down in my heart. Not an earthly change can cause us to part. I've been made a child with a homeward star. I love the Lord deep down in my heart. From day to day he's leading me on to that bright land of beautiful dawn. From his dear side I'll never depart. And too I'll learn more what I shall see when I have crossed life's mystical sea. I love the Lord deep down in my heart. I love the Lord deep down in my heart. Not an earthly change can cause us to part. I've been made a child with a homeward star. I love the Lord deep down in my heart. Such boundless, precious, glorious love the Savior sends from heaven above. From his dear side I'll never depart. It fills my soul with wonderful joy and drives away the things that annoy. I love the Lord deep down in my heart. I love the Lord deep down in my heart. Not an earthly change can cause us to part. I've been made a child with a homeward star. I love the Lord deep down in my heart.
Amen.
Page 46. this world I've tried most everything, and I'm happy now to say there is nothing like religion in a good old-fashioned way. I'm walking in the old-time way, and I want the world to know that I'd rather be an old-time Christian than anything I know. I'd rather be an old-time Christian than anything I know. There's nothing like an old-time Christian with a Christian love to show. I'm walking in the grand old highway, and I'm telling everywhere I go that I'd rather be an old-time Christian than anything I know. There are many things I'd like to be as my journey I pursue. I've longed to be a leader like a mortal man would do. I would long to be a millionaire with $1 million to bestow. But I'd rather be an old-time Christian than anything I know. I'd rather be an old-time Christian than anything I know. There's nothing like an old-time Christian with a Christian love to show. I'm walking in the grand old highway, and I'm telling everywhere I go that I'd rather be an old-time Christian than anything I know. All the world is bright since I got bright. Now I sing and I pray and I shout. All my burdens have been lifted since the Savior brought me out. I will tell the world both far and near as I travel here below that I'd rather be an old-time Christian than anything I know. I'd rather be an old-time Christian than anything I know. There's nothing like an old-time Christian with a Christian love to show. I'm walking in the grand old highway, and I'm telling everywhere I go that I'd rather be an old-time Christian than anything I know.
Amen.
Good to see everyone out tonight. Appreciate you being in the Lord's house on Wednesday night. Biggest night of the week.
Praise
Or the
God.
largest, biggest night of the week. So looking forward to this. I have thoroughly enjoyed Dr. Grady McMurtry
Amen.
these last few days. And it has been, iron sharpeneth iron. And if you don't bring in, I can never give you in this church what Brother Grady's been able to give. It's beyond my abilities.
Yeah, me too.
But I've heard throughout the congregation several people have made this comment that I've gleaned one or two things. You know what? There's things that I'd have never given you, but he has, and I'm glad the Lord sent him our way.
Amen.
And we've had this opportunity to have him. It's been a blessing. It's been a blessing. And we've had, I don't know, a lot of things online, a lot of people watching online, and as a matter of fact, we had an order for books and material after everyone was gone last night. Pat and I delivered them today, so I hope she paid you, Doc. I'm not trusting that she did. And so it's just how people were interested in what's going on. And we're glad he's here. And we're going to come to the altar and pray. Ask unspoken requests for raised hands. Those that like to gather around the altars and pray in your seat, wherever you're most comfortable. And then Sister Marcia's going to sing us a song, and Brother McMurtry will come. Father, we love you. Thank you for this night and what you're doing for us in this place. Because this is one little spot. It's a great deal. Bible-based truths.
this way by the river. If I leave you here, that's where you'll find me. Let's meet by the river, over on that beautiful shore.
Okay, Dr. McMurtry, are you ready? He's ready. Come on, brother. Make it welcome tonight.
Thank you, thank you. You know, I rarely get applause at the end, much less the beginning. I really appreciate that. And it's been a joy and a pleasure to be with you. I forgot to mention something on Sunday to prepare you for this week. You see, I have a brain stretching ministry, and I should have warned you about that. You know, I come into town and I stretch brains. So if any of you feel like you've had your brain stretched, that's why. Hello? Hello. So let's see how your day's been today. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes. I knew you could get it right after 4 days of rehearsals. Well, we have saved our biggest presentation for tonight. We're going to talk about dinosaurs. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about dinosaurs, the Bible, the fossils, and what is the evidence we actually find in the ground. Now, of course, people will ask you when you talk about dinosaurs and you're a Christian, and they say, well, are dinosaurs found in the Bible? I say, of course dinosaurs are found in the Bible. They read it every day. Hello? But of course, think with me for just a moment. I want to talk with you about what does the word dinosaur actually mean? Because if you're a public school student, for instance, and you are taught about what does the word dinosaur mean, most teachers in public school will say, well, it means terrible lizard, or they might say it means thunder lizard. Those are typically the two most common things they say. But the word dinosaur doesn't actually mean that. The word dinosaur was invented in 1841 by a guy named Sir Richard Owen. In 1841, he knew exactly what he meant using this term. It doesn't mean terrible or thunder lizard. What it actually means is awesome lizard. Because in 1841, Sir Richard Owen believed that dinosaurs were a part of God's awesome creation. And so he called them awesome lizards. But of course, the word dinosaur is not found in the Bible. And so what is the most common word used before 1841 for dinosaurs? It's simply the word dragon. That's the most common. Now, there are some other words. For instance, in some literature, you'll find the word lindworm and so forth. But dragon is the most common ancient word for dinosaurs prior to 1841. But the real question we want to ask ourselves is, are dinosaurs mentioned in the Bible? Now, if you were here last night, you're already prepared for this. We were talking about humans and human evolution, etc., that there's no such thing, correct?
Correct.
And I mentioned that if God starts the Bible on day 1, week 1, month 1, year 1, is there any such thing as prehistoric?
No.
You could have been stronger there, okay? So if God starts the Bible on day 1, week 1, month 1, year 1, is there any such thing as prehistoric?
No.
No, there's no such thing as prehistoric. Therefore, obviously, dinosaurs are mentioned in the Bible. As a matter of fact, there are 11 references to dinosaurs I'm going to share with you tonight. And of course, which book of the Bible do you think you would find the first reference to dinosaurs? Good choice, the first book. See, that was kind of a hint there, you know. And what chapter of the book of Genesis do you think you would find the first reference to dinosaurs? Chapter 1. See, folks, I'm trying to help you here. You know, the first, hello. Okay, well, let's take a look at Genesis chapter 1. We're going to look at day 5 of the week of creation. That's Genesis chapter 1, verses 21 to 23. God created great whales, or what I've done, by the way, is I've taken the Hebrew word but spelled it in English characters so you can actually see what the word is that was used. But it's also translated monsters or sea dragons. Sea dragons. And everything that creepeth and moveth and so forth, and every winged fowl. Now, here's the problem. God doesn't classify animals the same way we do. We have a very good classification system. It's really very good, invented by a Christian creation-believing scientist in Sweden 250 years ago. It's a very good system. As a matter of fact, I'd like you to think about something for just a minute. The ability to pigeonhole creatures is proof of creation. Hello? Think with me for just a moment. If evolution were really true, then all things would be evolving all the time. You'd just have a mush. But the ability to say this is a cat and that's a dog is a proof of creation.
Amen.
And the modern scientific nomenclature, using two words in Latin to describe a creature, that actually was started by a Christian creation-believing scientist. It's a very good method, but God doesn't use that method. Hello? And God classifies creatures very differently than we do. Now, the Hebrew word that is used here and translated winged fowl, well, you think of fowl, you think of bird, you think of feathers. Is that correct? However, this word in Hebrew actually means any animal that flies. We're not talking about insects, but any mammal, reptile, or bird that flies. It doesn't mean feathered. And so it includes bats. It includes the winged reptiles that we know of, as well as birds. And so God classifies things differently. He lumps things together differently than we do. But, well, the great sea dragons. Now, of course, later we'll talk about leviathans, which are sea dragons. And we're going to take a look at all of the winged creatures, including the reptiles and mammals, not just birds. But God creates the creatures that fly through the air and live in the water on day 5. And that includes the great marine reptiles and the reptiles that fly. Let's take a look at day 6 of creation. Let the earth bring forth the living creatures, cattle, creeping thing, and beasts of the earth. This is a direct reference to dinosaurs. Dinosaurs were created on day 5. That's terrestrial dinosaurs, the creatures that live on the land. And they were created on the same day as Adam and Eve. It's just that Adam and Eve were the last things to come along on day 6. And so here we have the first 2 references to dinosaurs or their relatives mentioned in the Bible. But let's think about this for just a moment. Dinosaurs and people lived together contemporaneously for 1,656 years until the time of Noah's flood. Now, please, we did this, by the way, earlier in the week. If you were not here, please give me one loud, hearty amen after my next statement. Never, ever get your education from government-run television, National Geographic, the Learning Channel, the Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, or Hollywood. Amen. Now, how many grandparents, great-grandparents in this room could I get you to raise your hand that you've been forced to watch at least one or more of the Jurassic Park movies? Come on, I should see a lot more hands than that. I want to point out to you that those movies are not science. Those movies are not science fiction. They are not science fantasy. What are the Jurassic Park movies? They are entertainment. We will agree, they're entertaining. And they are pure propaganda. They were made to promote evolution, but they're not even consistent with the theory of evolution they were made to promote. Movie number 4, and I think they're up to about 27 now, but movie number 4 was so bad that even major evolutionists said you shouldn't go see it. Now, how bad does it have to be for an evolutionist to say, don't go see it? Yeah. Hello? But you don't get your education from these things. Now, when you watch movies like that, or you go to school and they teach you that sharp claws and sharp teeth make a meat eater, and you see T-Rexes and velociraptors and so forth, and they tell you that they were meat eaters. But if you'll take a look at Genesis chapter 1, verses 29 and 30, God made all the creatures as vegetarians. That's people, dinosaurs, etc. And that's the creatures that live in the ocean, too. I have a DVD on Sharp Claws and Sharp Teeth Do Not a Meat Eater Make. And I point out in there that we have found things such as, in Florida, we have a bonnethead, not a hammerhead, but a bonnethead shark. It's predominantly a vegetarian shark. Recently in Costa Rica, we found a vegetarian spider. And you may not realize this, but 19 years ago, major evolutionists reclassified T-Rexes and velociraptors as vegetarian. Sharp claws and sharp teeth do not a meat eater make. Think with me about T-Rexes for just a moment. You've all seen pictures, museum skeletons, movies, with these creatures. And they have big, long, sharp, pointed teeth, and they have very sharp claws. But 19 years ago, they were reclassified as vegetarians. And why is that? Well, what about T-Rexes? Have you ever seen a T-Rex tooth up close and personal? No? Well, the largest male T-Rex tooth ever found is 10.5 inches long. Now, I span 10.5 inches, okay? And it's long and it's pointy. That's absolutely true. However, it has serrations on the front and back edge like a bread knife. You don't need serrations for meat. You only need that to cut thick vegetable material. Think of celery, palm fronds, and things like that. And those little claws. Did you ever notice how short the arms are on those creatures? Those arms are so short they can't even feed themselves with those things. Hello? Not a whole lot of good in a fight, neither. Hello? And a T-Rex tooth, 10.5 inches long, only has a 4-inch long root. So they have a shallow root. Now think about your teeth for just a moment. 2/3 of your tooth is in the gum and only 1/3 sticks out. And your teeth, generally speaking, touch each other to help reinforce each other. Is that correct? Correct. But T-Rex teeth are widely spaced, shallow rooted. Just for a moment, what would happen if a T-Rex with these long pointed individual teeth, widely spaced, shallow rooted, really were biting into a large animal, maybe weighing several tons, trying to escape, struggle for its life? What would happen to those teeth? They would simply break, is that correct? But we don't find them that way, and they don't replace their teeth the way sharks do. And so for many reasons, and there is one other one, I don't want to upset anybody who's already had dinner, but we have actually studied coprolite. Do you know what coprolite is? Coprolite, that's the fancy word for fossil dung. But we found fossil dung of T-Rexes and velociraptors, and all they ate was vegetation. So they've been reclassified as vegetarian 19 years ago. And so the fact of the matter is that people and dinosaurs could live together contemporaneously. It was not a problem. As a matter of fact, I want you to think about it. You 4 guys right here. If you had lived before the flood, you could have had your own pet T-Rex. Until it got too big to keep in the house. Hey, you don't keep a 30-foot long reptile in the house. But they were vegetarians. They didn't kill people. They didn't kill each other. Now, we do know that they started to scavenge later on. We've got the evidence for that. But think with me. What happened? The flood of Noah. God had Noah build an ark. And then remember, the Bible says that God sent to Noah those animals he was to take with him. Is that correct? Yes. And he sent 1 pair of the unclean, 3.5 pairs of the clean. And what was the requirement? When I say 3.5 pairs, there were 4 males and 3 females. The 4th male is used in the burnt offering by Noah after the flood, celebrating the survival and thanking God. Hello? And that left 3 pairs of breeding clean creatures. Now, dinosaurs are a form of reptile. Remember, not all reptiles are dinosaurs. But dinosaurs are reptiles, and according to the Bible, reptiles are unclean. So God would send 1 pair of each, dinosaur kind to be on the ark. And there are 9 references to dinosaurs or their relatives after the flood we find in the Bible. So obviously they were on the ark. Think with me for just a moment. We have a DVD on the Ark of Noah and so forth, but think with me. What was the qualification for an animal to go on the ark? Remember, Noah didn't gather the animals. He was busy building the ark. God sent to him the animals he was to take, correct? And what does God do? Well, remember that sin in the Garden of Eden had started a decay process, which is continuing today. We're getting worse and worse. We talked about that, for instance, last night. And I hated to be the bearer of bad news, but we're all getting worse over time. And but God knows this. So what did he do? He took 1 male, 1 female that had the least corrupted DNA in it and sent them on the ark, or 3 pairs of the least decayed, in order to have the best survival rate afterwards. And what was the qualifier to be on the ark? Number 1, it had to live on dry land. I think you'll agree there were no aquariums on the ark. Hello? And it had to breathe air through nostrils. So there's nothing aquatic that was on the ark, correct? No aquariums. But there were no insects either, because insects, well, they may live on dry land, but they don't breathe air through nostrils. They breathe through little holes in the side of their body called spiracles. And aren't you kind of glad he didn't take termites? Apparently some of you have to process that. Although I have to admit, excuse me, folks, it's just, I told you I came up here to cool off, and it ain't. I was really enjoying this afternoon, I got to tell you. But think with me for a second. I said no insects, and like I say, aren't you glad he didn't take termites? Although yes, me too. And I do find it, however, interesting. I really have a problem believing that there could be 2 camels on the ark and not a pair of fleas. Anyway, so what else was not on the ark? Well, anything that could survive in the water. Now, how did the insects survive? And there were no amphibians on the ark, because amphibians like to be wet. And so how did they survive? Remember, there are many amphibians that don't breathe air through nostrils either. And they survived on the floating debris, the billions of trees floating on the flood, and enough insects, enough amphibians, and that gave rest for, well, seals and walruses as well. I mean, they didn't have to be in the ark. We don't know whether they were or not, but they didn't have to be. And they're much better off in the water, really. So what was on the ark? Well, those reptiles, those mammals that live on the land, and the birds, and 8 people. There really wasn't that many things on the ark to begin with. And there are 9 references to dinosaurs or their relatives in the Bible, in the Old Testament, after the flood of Noah. Now, let's take a little look. The first one is in Job chapter 40, verse 15. Notice it says, "Behold now, Behemoth, which I made with thee. He eateth grass like an ox." Notice that this is a vegetarian. Is that correct? Now, Job is 350 years after the flood. He lives at roughly 2000 BC, or 4,000 years ago. And so 350 years after the flood, God says, "Behold now." He says, pay special attention to this, correct?
Yes.
Okay, in Crossville, God said, "Looky here."
Amen.
But this creature, Behemoth, what does the word mean? Because that's not English. That's actually Hebrew spelled in English characters. It's not translated in the Bible. But if you did translate it from Hebrew into English, it means beast of beasts. Beast of beasts. Does that sound big to you?
Yes.
Kind of gives you a feeling of big, right? Yes. And then let's take a look at verse 16. "Lo, now his strength is in his loins, and his force, or, well, power, is in his navel," or muscles of his belly. This is a big, strong creature. Is that correct? Yes. Verse 17 says, "He moveth his tail like a cedar tree." Now, there are people who print Bibles, and in margins they'll make notes, and maybe you have a Bible that says, "Oh, this is just some large land animal we know of today. It's a hippopotamus, a rhinoceros, an elephant." But I have done mission work in South Africa on 3 different occasions. I can assure you, when they kill an elephant in Africa, they cut off the tail and use it as a fly swatter. Come on, folks, it's a hard way to get fly swatters. It's very hard on the elephant. Do you guys have absolutely no compassion whatsoever? But let's think. Does an elephant have a tail the size of a cedar tree? No, I don't think so, do you? And what about a hippopotamus? Hello? What's the matter? You've never been mooned by a hippo before? Well, let's see if this is the connection or something else here. We might have a wire that's going bad. But does it have a tail the size of a cedar tree? No. I don't think so. And if an elephant or a hippo had a tail the size of a cedar tree, I mean, what would they look like? So I think you'll agree that here God is describing a large, air-breathing, land-dwelling dinosaur 350 years after the flood. Is that correct?
Correct.
And let's continue, because in verse 18, his bones are as strong pieces. The word also means tubes of brass, and his bones are like bars of iron. Now, this is an extremely important thing in the Hebrew. Think with me. This tells you it is not a mammal. It has to be a reptile, because reptiles and birds have hollow bones. They are tubes. And so this is actually a very scientific statement. It's not a poetic statement. It's a scientific statement that this is, in fact, a reptile being described. And so here we have a very large, reptile, a dinosaur being described 350 years after the flood at the time of Job. And of course, this is the drawing of a brachiosaur, roughly 43 feet long. This brachiosaur is made famous by Jurassic Park movie number 1. This is the dinosaur that sneezes all over the little girl. Come on, folks, I'm just trying to bring back vivid memories, okay? But what I'd like to do is, I would like to show you the toe bone of a brachiosaur. Are you ready? 6 people are ready. How about the rest of you? You ready? Oh. Well, this is the toe bone of a brachiosaur compared to my knuckle. I'll repeat. That's a toe bone compared to my knuckle. Apparently, it takes a lot to impress you folks. Well, I tell you what. Let me show you what it would look like if a man were standing next to the front leg of a brachiosaur. Are you ready? Well, that was about 10. How about the rest of you? Yes? Oh, well, this is what it looked like if a man was standing next to the front leg of a brachiosaur. Now tell me, does this look like tubes of brass and bars of iron? Because I think so. And then, of course, let's take a look at Job chapter 41, verse 1. Canst thou draw out Leviathan with a hook? Or technically it means fish hook. So what is God saying? Can you draw out this creature with a fish hook? No. And God goes on to describe what one looks like, but God must love Leviathans because he mentions them 5 times in Scripture. Job 41 is the description of what one looks like, but they are also found in Job chapter 3:8, Psalm 74:14, Psalm 104:26, and Isaiah 27:1. Now, Job is 4,000 years ago, 2000 BC. You can't necessarily tell when a psalm was written because the book of Psalms was completed over a long period of time. I mean, some psalms, if it's a psalm of David or something like that, we can date it exactly. But some psalms you just can't date. But Isaiah, the prophet, is a contemporary of the king Hezekiah. He lived between 700 and 750 BC. Now, please tell me, do you consider Isaiah to be a reliable witness? Yes. That wasn't strong enough, folks. Do you consider Isaiah to be a reliable witness? Yes. And he says that these creatures called Leviathans, these great marine reptiles, were alive only 2,700 years ago. And if you will take a look, this is one of the creatures we thought was a Leviathan. You have to understand that, creation scientists thought that this creature called a chronosaur, which reaches up to 30 foot long, or that this creature called a plesiosaur, found up to 51 foot long, we thought that, the word Leviathan probably referred to one of these 2 creatures. However, 80 years ago, creation-believing scientists had to modify their thinking. We didn't change our opinion, but you have to modify your thinking based on new discoveries. And 80 years ago, we found this. It's called the super croc. You see, it is 40 foot long and weighed about 10 tons. I think you'll agree that's a lot of croc. The thing is, we found it in the middle of the Sahara Desert. I think you have to ask yourself, what is a 40-foot-long crocodile doing in the middle of the Sahara Desert? The classic answer is anything he wants to. But here you see comparing to a man, and let me show you up close and personal. Now, this is the actual fossil skeleton of a 40-foot-long super croc. But I find that most people are really drawn to big jaws, teeth, big claws, and so forth. Would you agree? It's kind of what draws our attention is the big teeth, big skulls, big claws, and so forth. So let me show you what the jaws would look like. You see, the jaws are 6 foot long. And you see the little guy right down here? He is called a light snack. But I've mentioned, I think, that I've done mission work in Brazil. I did mission work every year, 16 straight years until COVID stopped me last year. But the first year that I started doing mission work in Brazil, 2005, we found this, a fossil crocodile 50 foot long. The description found in Job of Leviathan would fit any of these 4 creatures, and therefore the word Leviathan might be a generic word, or it could be a specific word for any of these. But certainly we have the physical evidence to support the description in Job 41. And then, if you go to Psalm 91, verse 13, thou shalt tread upon the lion and adder, the young lion and the dragon. Remember, that's just the old word for dinosaur, correct? And this is in Psalm 91. And I'd like to show you something we found back in 2003 at Hell Creek, Montana. Hell Creek is world famous for the tremendous millions of dinosaur bones that are found in this area. And it's world famous. And back in 2003, we found this. Now, the nickname is Dragon King. However, the technical name is Dracorex hogwartsii. Anybody here familiar with the Harry Potter movies? Yes. It's named after Hogwarts, hello? But this is a 12-foot-long dinosaur called Dragon King. Now, what I would like to do is this. I would like to show you a close-up of the skull of this creature, and I'd like you to look at the next photograph and tell me, does this sort of kind of look like what you'd sort of kind of expect a dragon to sort of kind of look like, okay? Are you ready? Yes. Apparently not. Are you ready? Oh. Does this sort of look kind of like what you sort of expect a dragon to look like? I think so too. Hello? And if we go to Isaiah 14:29, Isaiah 30, verse 6, he twice talks about fiery flying serpents. Now, again, serpent is a reptile or dragon. So again, here we have these references. This is from Isaiah. This is 2,700 years ago. Now, I would like to show you, these are drawings of just 2 of the winged reptiles we know of from the fossil record. And when Isaiah says he saw them, we think he's talking about this one up here. The name is Rhamphorhynchus. I'm leaving early tomorrow morning. On Friday, there will be a spelling test. But Rhamphorhynchus is the size of a seagull. I think you do all know what a seagull looks like, correct? Yes. But I would like to talk with you about this one down here. Now, I'm going to show you the skeleton of one of these creatures hanging in a museum, a fossilized skeleton. But this creature, the skeleton looks like this. Would you agree with me? It's a little hard to tell how big that is, though, right? Yeah. I mean, it's up against the ceiling. You don't really have a perspective of just how big that is. So I thought what I would do is I would show you the drawing of what it would look like if a man were actually standing next to one of these creatures. Are you ready? Yes. There's the man. Here's the creature. You see, this has a wingspan of 36 feet. This is not something you want to run into in a dark alley. Oh, come on, folks, group hug. Now, here we have these references to dinosaurs or their relatives in the Old Testament. Now, the Old Testament was closed or completed about 400 BC. Do we have reliable human history of people and dinosaurs living together after the close of the Old Testament? Now, I'm not going to show you all the references. We've got a DVD with many, many more. But I want to show you a few references to reliable histories of people and dinosaurs living together outside of the Bible. And these are from reliable historians. At the time the Old Testament closed, about 400 BC, there's a very important Greek man. Now, he does believe in evolution, but he is so important that he is actually called the father of history. His name is Herodotus. Herodotus, the great Greek historian, writes the first reliable histories of the ancient world outside of the Scripture. Now, the Bible is the oldest history book in the world. You could have said amen, okay? And it's totally reliable, but after the Old Testament was completed, then we start getting to people like Herodotus, the father of history. And in his writings, he describes winged serpents, flying reptiles. The description he gives us right down here sounds exactly like Rhamphorhynchus. And that's 2,400 years ago. Now, only 100 years later, there's another very important Greek guy. Again, he does believe in evolution. How many of you are familiar with a guy called Alexander the Great? Yes. Oh, come on. You remember Alexander the Great, right? Yes. Come on. If you don't remember him, he's going to be really upset. That's why he called himself the Great. Hello? But he's leading his troops into northwestern India around the areas of, 320, 323, and they saw dragons along the way. Now, that's 2,300 years ago. Now, again, let's go to time that would be particularly important to us as Christians. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to be a serious student of the Bible, you must read the first century Christian historian, the Apostle Luke. But if you're going to be a serious student of the Bible, you must also read the first century non-Christian historian, Flavius Josephus. And 2,000 years ago, Flavius Josephus wrote about flying serpents, winged reptiles, and he gives us one very interesting thing. He says they lived in holes in the ground but flew through the air. It has been less than 20 years ago we actually found what I will label fossil dinosaur burrows. We have actually found where small dinosaurs did dig in the ground and did live. Yet he writes about this 2,000 years ago. Kind of gives credence to his writings, don't you think? Yes. At the same time that Flavius Josephus is writing his very famous histories, there's a Roman naturalist, Pliny the Elder. Now, a naturalist is a sort of an early form of scientist. And Pliny the Elder was a naturalist. He died at the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 because he wanted to study earthquakes and volcanoes, and he got too close. Don't tell me science can't be dangerous. Hello? But 2 years before he perished at Pompeii, he wrote a book in 77 talking about how dragons fought elephants in India 2,000 years ago. Well, that's 2,000 years ago, but only 200 years after Pliny, there's another Roman naturalist named Flavius Philostratus, and he wrote this. Hello. Africa produces these elephants and dragons, but 200 years after this, he wrote, every ridge, every swamp in India was girt, meaning full with dinosaurs. And the swamp kind were sluggish, about 40 to 45 foot long. And he said, and they have no crest on their head. Please tell me, why would he write they have no crest on their head unless he knew that there were some that didn't? And we have found dinosaurs with and without crests on their head, too. And, of course, how many of you remember a guy named Marco Polo? Yes. Oh, come on, y'all remember Marco Polo. Well, he left Europe in 1271. He walked to western China, arrived in the spring of 1273. There he accurately describes a large two-legged dinosaur. It had two large legs. It was a reptile, therefore a serpent, as he called it, about 30 foot long with a big head full of big, sharp teeth, something that looks kind of like that. And he accurately describes this basically 700 years ago in China. I think you'll also agree that Southeast Asia is full of stories of dragons, correct? Yes. Now, obviously, much of it is mythology, but I would point out that myth always starts in reality. Myth always starts in reality. And for those of you who happen to like the year 1611, in 1611 we have the official court records of the Emperor of China having to hire a royal dragon feeder or royal dragon caregiver. You could translate it either way. And that's only 400 years ago in China. How y'all doing? Well, let's go back. Let's go back to England. The year is 1484. William Caxton was the first man in England to use a printing press with movable type. Now, he didn't print Bibles, but he did print Bible verses on that press. But he also published a book in 1484 talking about how dinosaurs lived in Italy at that time. Now, that's 1484. Only 90 years later, we have a genuine scientist. He's an Italian, very important to the history of science. His name is Ulysses Aldrovandus. In 1572, he records an encounter with a small dinosaur. But this man is so important, he's called the father of modern natural history. He's the first man in human history to acquire a large building, acquire 7,000 samples from nature, put them on display in the world's first true natural history museum. He's very important to the history of science. But in 1572, he records an encounter with a small dinosaur. It was a baby. It was only about 2 foot long. But up here in Latin, because that was the language of science 500 years ago, he calls it a dragon. But it was only about 2 foot long. And he paints for us a picture. Now you can see claws, you can see scales, you can see a forked tongue like a snake. There's no question this is a reptile. But did you happen to notice anything particularly interesting about this particular reptile? No rear legs, only 2 legs in the front. And you may think that this is fiction. You may think it's imagination. But it is not. It is reality. Let me show you a living reptile alive on Earth today that has only 2 legs in the front. And today we have reptiles that have only 2 legs in the back, alive today, do not have front legs. And so this is not fiction, this is reality. And going back to England, the year now 1496, this is the covering of the tomb or grave of the Bishop of Carlisle who died in 1496. His name was Richard Bell. Now, the cathedral at Carlisle is one of the most northern cathedrals in England. It's right up against the Scottish border. I was there a few years ago, and here you see the top of the tomb of Richard Bell, and it was the custom 500 years ago the cathedrals of England are world famous for their brass plaques, as you see here, correct? Now, for those of you that are involved in the music ministry, I thought you might find this interesting. He's buried in the middle of the choir. Apparently he liked music and, well, anyway. But these brass plaques that you see here, this rectangular one down here, I know you can't see it, but I will show it to you up close and personal. But I want to pay special attention to this particular plaque on top of this Christian bishop's tomb. It looks like that. Notice that we have here 2 dinosaurs, long neck, long tails, and so forth. But if you'll look closely, they are 2 different species. Notice the spikes on the tail of this one and not this one, correct? That is enough information for us to identify the dinosaur that was drawn here. It's this one. Now, the one on the right, that's just our best guess. But the one on the left, we can actually identify. And this is only 500 years ago in England. How y'all doing? Now, we have a lot more of this kind of thing. I just wanted to share one more with you, but I would like you to pay special attention to the source of this next item. The year is 1883. This comes from Scientific American magazine. Now, this magazine is the house organ of the American Museum of Natural History in New York. It is 154% pure evolutionist. It is so evolutionist, I call it the unscientific American magazine. Are you with me? But in their own magazine in 1883, they published an article talking about how a small armored dinosaur died in Bolivia that year. Now, I think when an evolutionist tells you that a small armored dinosaur died in Bolivia in 1883, it's worth paying attention to. How about you? Yeah, I do too. Now, we're going to go on, but I just want to talk with you for a moment without the slides. think with me for a minute about reptiles, particularly dinosaurs and so forth. Now, what's one of the unique characteristics of reptiles? Surely it would be that they never stop growing. Now, up here in Tennessee, I mean, you are certainly aware of that. The longer the snake, the older the snake, because reptiles never stop growing. As long as they're alive, they get bigger, correct? Correct. Now, down in Florida where I live, we also have some reptiles too. We call them alligators. Yes. Now, where I live, we have so many alligators that we think of them as neighborhood pets. We do. We think of them as neighborhood pets until they get to be about 6 foot long. Because when they get to be about 6 foot long, alligators go sort of through this personality change. Yep. And they get really nasty. And they start eating the cats, the dogs, babies, old people, and tourists. And in Florida, we get really upset when they eat the tourists, you know. It's just bad for business. You know? Some of you think I'm kidding. Before COVID, when we had more tourists available, we would have tourists that lost arms to alligators. Go back a few more years, we lost 3 whole tourists in 1 year. Hello? Apparently some of you are not quite getting this. About 12 years ago, we actually trapped a 12-foot-long male alligator, took it out of a drainage canal in downtown Miami, Florida. Wow. This is why we don't have homeless people in downtown Miami, Florida. Now, I moved to Orlando in 1973. In 1973, the American alligator was on the endangered species list. However, please tell me, what happens when you protect an endangered species? Well, they not only reproduce, they overpopulate. Is that correct?
Correct.
Well, in the 90s, they were taken off of the endangered species list. Today, we have 1 million alligators living in the state of Florida. Today, we have a hunting season on alligators the way you hunt deer in Florida, Tennessee. We sort of think of it as the other white meat. You know, it tastes a little like chicken. Anyway, now think with me for just a second. They never stop growing. Now today, male alligators in Florida can reach 15 foot long. However, they start to reproduce when they're only 4 to 6 foot long, but they can reach 15. Now think with me for just a minute. There is a time, the Bible tells us, when people used to live to be 900 years old. Is that correct? I don't think that's fiction. I think it's reality. I've got a chapter in my book on it. I've got a DVD on it. I show 19 medical and scientific reasons which, taken in combination, would have allowed people to live to be 900 years old, okay? Yes. Now, of course, today we only live basically 1/10 as long, right? I mean, we sort of think of really old age in the 90s. Back then it was in the 900s, correct? Yeah. Although I think you will have to agree there are certain advantages to only living 1/10 as long as we used to. I'm sure the ladies will agree. Eve could have had children for 450 years. Anybody need a towel? Now, please tell me, today in Florida, well, alligators can grow to 15 foot long, but they start to reproduce, again, from about 4 to 6 foot long. And they have an average life expectancy where they're not hunted of 50 years of age. So the average lifetime is 50 years of age in the areas where they're not hunted. Now, let's think about this. In Florida today, men live an average of about 75 years of age in the areas where they're not hunted. Apparently, you've never been to Miami. Well, let's think about this. So today, alligators can be 50, men 75. That means that alligators live about 2/3 as long as people, correct? Correct. Now, if there's a time when people lived to be 900 years old, please tell me, how old was the alligator? 600. I heard it back there. We got a good mathematician. 600 years old, and they never stop growing. Now, I just showed you the skeleton of a crocodile 50 foot long in Brazil. Is that correct? Yes. Who's to say they aren't the same species we have today, but simply allowed to grow for a longer period of time? That's not an irrational thought. No, it's not. And, well, kind of getting an idea about this. Now, Again, Noah built the ark, but God sent the animals he was to take with him, correct?
Correct.
Now, would you agree with me? There's a lot of people who have a problem with dinosaurs in the ark. I understand that, but I hope I can convince you it wasn't a problem. So please tell me, what was the average length of a fully mature adult dinosaur as found in the fossil record? So I'm talking about at full maturity, dying from old age. I want all of you to think of all the different dinosaurs you know of. You know, the textbooks, the movies, the museums, okay? So try to think of all the different dinosaurs that you have. And I want you to think about this. Would you agree God is like smart?
Amen.
Hello?
Amen. Yeah.
Okay. So please tell me, what was the average length of a fully mature adult dinosaur as found in the fossil record? And just to help you a little here, remember, they all hatched from eggs. We found lots of dinosaur eggs. The largest dinosaur we have found so far is called a titanosaur. It's found in Patagonia in deep South America, and the length is approximately 130 foot long. So that's the longest, okay? But just thinking of all the different kinds you know, try to come up with an average length for a fully mature adult dinosaur as found in the fossil record. And now I'll take bids. So what's the average? Thank you, Wade. But you love 20. I don't know what it is with you, but you love 20. I've noticed that. Okay, so I'm going to start with 40. Thank you. 20, 40. Do I have another bid? Pardon? Okay, we'll have 20, 40, 60. One more bid. Well, somebody said 50. Now, you've got to watch the prices right. You always want to be $1 over, okay? And I had a bit of, well, anyway. I'm going to have to stop the bidding because you're all too high. The actual average length of a fully adult dinosaur as found in the fossil record is between 3 foot and 5 foot long. The current average is now 4.7 foot. Did you hear that? The average length of a fully mature adult dinosaur is only 4.7, but between 3 and 5. Now, first of all, would you agree with me? You've got dogs in the neighborhood that are bigger than that.
That's right.
I mean, when was the last time you saw a dog out walking its owner? The next time you think about dinosaurs, I want you to remember that the average length dinosaur was actually smaller than the largest neighborhood dog. You see, what evolutionists don't want you to know, they want to impress you with the big ones, you know? And you know why? Because they want your money. Seriously, they want your money so you can pay them to keep a job to go out and dig up more. But if they showed you the little ones, you wouldn't be impressed. Is that correct?
That's right.
But the fact of the matter is that many dinosaurs were only the size of a chicken. There were dinosaurs that were only the size of a house cat. There were dinosaurs that were only the size of a squirrel. And are you ready for this? You ready for this? There was one dinosaur that was only the size of a mouse. Her eyebrows went straight up. Yeah, there was one dinosaur that's only the size of a mouse. It's got a great name. It's called a Mosasaurus. Technically, that means mouse lizard. Well, does that change your opinion of dinosaurs? Yeah. Now, think with me. God, you said and agreed with me, is smart. Is that correct?
Amen.
Now, if you're God and you want these creatures to live for as long as possible, to reproduce for as long as possible, are you going to send the oldest, biggest, most mature, maybe past the age of reproduction? No. Or are you going to send the juveniles at the age of puberty? Sure. So if the adults average 4.7, then as juveniles in the ark, they're going to average maybe 2.5, 3. Anybody really have a problem with dinosaurs on the ark?
No problem.
That's no problem at all. As a matter of fact, you can actually see a picture of them going in right here. What's the matter? Too small for you? Oh, here's a close-up, okay? You see, I want to share a piece of information with you. From the year 1824 to the year 2004, 1,401 names had been given to different kinds of dinosaurs. But in 2004, evolutionists and creationists agreed on something. You see, evolutionists, well, they're atheists. They don't believe in God, but they want immortality. Now, how does an atheist get immortality? It's really quite simple. When you find something, you name it after yourself. Hello. And so one guy had, he dug up a baby, named it after himself. Another guy, a juvenile of the exact same kind, but named it after himself. Another guy dug up an adult and named it after himself. And we had 2, 3, even 4 names for the same dinosaur. And so in 2004, the list was reduced to 670. However, because of some recent discoveries, the number is slightly larger than that now. However, there are only 50 to 55 different kinds of dinosaurs. Now, what did God send to Noah? He sent 1 pair of each kind. Is that correct? So that means you'd only need 100 to 110 animals that average around 2.5, 3 foot long to get all the dinosaurs in the ark you'd ever need. Anybody have a problem with dinosaurs in the ark? And in my DVD on the ark, I talk about how many animals were actually there. It's amazing how few there really were. There could have been as little as 1,800, but no more than 17,500. But the ark was more than big enough to do the job. And, of course, if you've ever had a public school education, when they were teaching about dinosaurs and they were teaching about time and so forth, they showed you a chart in your books that looked something like this. Now, it might not be exactly the same, but you had something that looks like this. Is that right? You started at the top, and there were different layers named in the ground there with different names for each one, and they were associated with different various times and so forth. And next to them, sometimes you would see illustrations of creatures that lived supposedly at these different times. And this does look at least familiar, correct? Yes. You've seen something like it. Is that right? Now, according to evolutionists, as you start at the top and you go down, it gets older and older, and you go down here to the beginning of the Cambrian, and they'll say that this is around 450, 500, 540, it depends. And then before that, there's a period called the Precambrian. And this is what they show you. But please let me ask you a question. When you were in high school or college and you got out, did you ever dig in the ground to see whether or not they were telling you the truth? Excuse me? No, and neither did I till I got a couple of degrees in science. And the point is this: the layers do exist in the ground. Many of them have fossils in them. You know that by just living around here. Sure. But the problem is the layers are not in the order shown in the textbook. The layers are there, and they do have fossils in many cases, but not all. But the layers are not in the order shown in the textbook. What we find are the layers are upside down, backwards, missing, interlaced. That's what we find all over the world. You see, this is a trade secret of the evolutionists. They take the layers and then rearrange them and then say, see, the layers prove that we are right. But please tell me, if you rearrange the evidence, can you not prove anything? Yes. Let me show you. You see, there are only, and I illustrate down here, there are only 25 locations pinned here, named here. There are only 25 locations where you can find some of the layers in the order shown in the textbook, but there is nowhere that you can find them all in one place. It simply doesn't exist. And what do? Well, it actually turns out the layers exist in different places around the world. And so they take a layer from Asia, and a layer from Africa, and a layer from Canada, and a layer from Brazil, and then they put them in the order they want them. And then they claim proof. What is the single greatest scientific difference between the evolutionary scientists and the creation-believing scientists? The evolutionists rearrange the evidence before they claim proof. The creationist doesn't. Because we believe that whatever we find, no matter what it is going to be consistent with the Creator God. We have no incentive to rearrange the evidence. But the evolutionists must rearrange the evidence before they claim proof, and that is a monstrous difference. You see, let's think about this for a second. Now, if you could find the thickest layer of any one of those in the chart, what's called the geological time scale or the geological time column, and this is a think question, but if you could find the thickest layer of any one of those that are named in the chart, would you agree it would supposedly represent the longest period of time for accumulation of that layer, correct? Yes. So the thickest layer would presumably be representative of the longest period of time for accumulation of that layer. Yes. Because if you find less, you can always say some had eroded away after deposition. Because remember, these are sedimentary rock. This is dried out mud, correct? Here's the problem. If you take the thickest layer of each one of those layers named in the textbook, no matter where it's found in the world, bring it all to one place, put it in the order shown in the textbook, the pile of layers would be 76 miles high. What's the problem? The average thickness of all layers on Earth is 1.2 miles. Now that means that there is 74.2, miles missing. Hello? Yeah. You see, the scientific proof is not necessarily what's there, it's what's missing. Hello? And here, there's 74.8 miles missing. I think technically they call that bummer. Hello? So, again, nowhere in the world can you find all these layers in this order. The layers exist, fossils do exist, don't misunderstand me, but nowhere in the world can you find this. Now, I would like to give you two numbers worth remembering. Now, again, these are simple, easy to remember things, but I'm going to describe for you what we find in the ground, all right? On the Earth's surface, 75% of the Earth's dry land surface is covered with dried out mud layers containing trillions of dead plants and animals that all drowned. Did you hear that? 75% of the Earth's dry land surface is covered with dried out mud layers containing trillions of dead plants and animals that all drowned. Now, does that sound like slow, gradual accumulation over millions and billions of years, or the result of a one-year-long worldwide flood to you? Yeah, flood. And when I figured that one out, I stopped believing in evolution. The second number I want you to know is this. Of the 75%, 80 to 85% does not even have 3 layers in the order shown in the textbook. Did you hear that? Yeah. Only 15% of the Earth's surface has even 3 or more in the layers shown in the order in the textbook, but nowhere can you find them all. And then again, would you agree with me, looking at the geological time scale or geological time column here, you notice these creatures that are drawn as existing at different times, correct? I mean, that's what they're showing you. Please tell me, is that a photograph or a drawing? Drawing. That's a drawing. You know what? The last time I looked, you can draw anything you want to. And then would you agree with me, evolutionists claim that things get bigger, better, faster, smarter over time, correct? Come on, folks, evolutionists say. The idea you go from single cell to multiple cell, from amoeba to man, the things are getting bigger, better, faster, smarter over time. Is that correct? Yes. Now, please tell me, when you became a Christian, did you leave your brain at the door? No. Come on, folks, I told you, I don't ask trick questions. When you became a Christian, did you leave your brain at the door? No. No. There's a thinking, intelligent, prudent human being. Aren't you going to want to just check out and see whether things really do get bigger, better, faster, smarter over time? You could have been more affirmative there. Well, let's just take a look. Now, again, I live in Orlando, Florida. I love coming to Tennessee, as I've said, for many reasons, of course. But one of the reasons I love coming to Tennessee is you just don't have some of the things that we've got in Florida. I mean, for instance, maybe some of you have been to Florida for various reasons. And if you've driven down there or you've flown down there, did you notice at the border of Florida as you're coming down on the roads, I-10, I-75, I-95, or at the airports, those big sounds that says, "Welcome to the land of insects." Because we can grow some real hummers down there. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons I love coming up here is you just don't have some of the things that we have in Florida. For example, you don't have any cockroaches. No. You think you have cockroaches. You ain't got cockroaches. We have cockroaches. Our cockroaches are 2.5 to 2 3/4 inches long. We got cockroaches. Down in Florida, we even have bumper stickers that say, "Our cockroaches ate your cockroaches." But let's think about this. If evolution were true, if things are supposed to get bigger, better, faster, smarter over time, And in Florida today, we have cockroaches that are 2.5 to 2 3/4 inches long, which we do. Please tell me, if I were to go back, suppose millions of years, how big should I find fossil cockroaches? I love that technical term, itty bitty. I bet you know that other technical term, teeny weeny, don't you? How come I never get the scientific terms like microscopic, minuscule? But I like itty bitty, I do. And sir, I want you to know, I think you have a fine mind. I think if evolution were true, you'd be absolutely correct. I just want to share that with you. The problem is that in the fossil record, we typically find fossil cockroaches that are over 6 inches long. Any of you got a problem with a 6-inch long cockroach? You do? Oh, look, folks, there's no problem at all. You just get a leash and you walk them twice a day. Well, again, I had mentioned, of course, that when I was getting my Bachelor of Science degree in evolution at UT, remember, I used to hitchhike to get a ride, correct? Y'all remember that, right? But that got old and it got dangerous. I never did have a car during my undergraduate work at Tennessee, but I did eventually get a motorcycle. Now, it, of course, was a powerful enough motorcycle to be on the interstates back then. And remember, in the 60s, by the way, I remember coming through here when there was no interstate. I remember getting off at Crab Orchard. Hello. But back in those days, the speed limit was 75, and nobody looked at you at 80, correct? You remember those Harlequin days? Yeah. So I would, on long weekends, short breaks, long weekends, I wouldn't go home to D.C., I would travel around. And I seem to remember that in traveling around here particularly, you've got something called a dragonfly here. Is that correct? Yes. Now, there are different species of dragonfly around here, but typically you'll find dragonflies with wingspans of about 1.5 inches up to about 4 inches around here. Is that roughly correct? However, have any of you ever been to an area that had dragonflies with wingspans 6-inch wide? You've never seen a dragonfly with a 6-inch wingspan. Well, believe me, I used to ride a motorcycle. I've met some. And if you go to Louisiana, you go to South Carolina, you go to northern Michigan, you will find dragonflies with 6-inch wingspans. Let me show you the photograph of one. Now, here we have a live dragonfly, and from the tip of the wing there to the tip of the wing there, that is 6 inches across. Any of you happen to notice what it's sitting on top of? What's it sitting on top of? A fossil dragonfly, yeah. So you notice the head here, the body that goes to here, the tail that goes off the screen, the 2 wings, 4 wings here. Is that correct? Yes. Good observation. That is a fossil dragonfly, but that's not what's important about it. What's important about that fossil dragonfly is that fossil dragonfly is a baby. That is a baby fossil dragonfly. You see, adult dragonflies in the fossil record have wingspans of 36 inches. Now, I want you to think about this. You're headed towards Nashville. You're doing 70 miles an hour. This dragonfly with a 36-inch wingspan flies in front of you. I mean, you're talking about at least serious car wash. Possibly windshield replacement. And if you're on a motorcycle, I don't even want to discuss it. So tell me, are things getting bigger, better, faster, smaller? Or does it appear, looking at the physical evidence, that things are getting smaller, slower, and dumber? Oh, things are getting smaller, slower, and dumber over time. And again, let's take a look at the evidence. Remember, too, evolutionists say that things change over time. As a matter of fact, that is the scientific definition for the use of the word evolution, change over time. And don't evolutionists say that one kind changes into another kind, and then it changes into another kind? Is that correct? I mean, that's a staple of evolution, correct? Now, you told me you didn't leave your brain at the door, correct? So as thinking, intelligent, prudent human beings, aren't you going to want to just check it out and see whether things do, in fact, change over time? Well, let's just take a little look. Now, here, this is the photograph of a live ant living in Mexico today. This is a piece of amber with a dead ant trapped in it. This is from the Dominican Republic. Now, this is a live ant, the close-up top of the head here. alive in Mexico today. But the amber from the Dominican Republic, according to evolutionists, is 25 to 40 million years old. So supposedly there's 25 to 40 million years between those two photographs. Do you see any difference? No, as far as I'm concerned, they could be the same ant. Or, what about in Tennessee, ginkgo trees? Now, the ginkgo has a very unique, flat, fan-shaped leaf, supposed to be perhaps the first true tree species to have ever evolved, according to evolutionists, and we have ample numbers of them in Tennessee. This, however, is the photograph of a fossil ginkgo leaf from North Dakota. Now, according to evolutionists, there's 150 million years between those two photographs. Please tell me, do you see any more difference than you would expect to see between any two leaves on any one tree? No. No change. Or, these are horseshoe crabs. Any of you have been to the Gulf, the Atlantic, you've probably seen some at one point. And this is obviously a fossil horseshoe crab, correct? Correct. Now, what I'm about to show you goes back to 2008. But in 2008, evolutionists found fossil horseshoe crabs that, according to the evolutionists, look exactly as the ones alive today, but according to them are 445 million years old. No change in 445 million years. How y'all doing? Well, let's keep going. Now, perhaps you're familiar with the chambered nautilus. This is a drawing of one, and you often find them decorations and so forth, cut in half with a beautiful spiral inside. This is called a chambered nautilus. They live off the coast of the continents and so forth. Now, I'm going to share a direct quotation from the National Geographic magazine, which you should never get your education from. So, in the magazine, they wrote, and right here, I'll put it over here so you can see it, but here it says, it remains essentially the same as its ancestors of 180 million years ago, a living link with the past. So the National Geographic says that these creatures have not essentially changed in 180 million supposed years, correct? Yes. Today, there are different species of chambered nautilus, but today, typically they're about 8 inches across as an adult. If you've seen them smaller, they're just juveniles. But the typical adult chambered nautilus today reaches about 8 inches across. Here's the problem. In the state of Arkansas, we have found fossils of chambered nautilus that are 8 foot across. Now, I reach 8 feet. Now, today they're 8 inches, but they used to be 8 feet. As you can see, they've remained essentially the same, right? Right? Yeah, right. And then, this is supposed to be one of the world's oldest fossil bats. It comes from the Princeton University collection. It's supposedly 34 to 56 million years old, but when I look at it, the skeleton looks exactly like bats do today. Is that correct? No change. Things do not change over time. God created certain kinds, and they have remained as such. Now, they may have gotten smaller, slower, and dumber, but they're still the same kind. And then, of course, if you were here on Monday night, I promised you that I would do this. Now, Monday night, I destroyed the idea. You cannot use any kind of technology to date rocks as millions and billions of years old, and I think I established that. Yes. And I said that a knowledgeable evolutionist does not even use carbon-14, potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium to date anything because a knowledgeable evolutionist does know they don't work. Now, there are the ones who simply parrot what they've been taught and don't know. But the knowledgeable, knowing evolutionist doesn't even bother to use them. And so how do they date the rocks? How do they date the fossils? And I said if you would come tonight, I would explain it to you. Now, how do they date rocks and how do they date fossils for age? If you'll look at me for just a moment, this is exactly how they do it. They tell us how old the rock layer is by the fossil you find in it. Then they tell you how old the fossil is by the rock layer you found it in. Perhaps I need to repeat that. They tell you how old the rock is by the fossil you find in it. Then they tell you how old the fossil is by the rock you found it in. Hello? This is self-serving circular reasoning. The Greeks call this a tautology that falls on its own weight. It is patently illogical. but that is exactly how they do it. And I would like to just give you one really good example. This is Chief Mountain in northern Montana near the Canadian border. What you see here is this gray sort of stone up here. If you'll look closely in the photograph, you'll notice many, many little layers here. I'm sure those in front see it easily. But you see these many layers. But this block of sedimentary rock sits directly on top of this layer of sedimentary rock below. There isn't even dust between these, but they are different kinds of rock. So you have one kind of rock on top with many layers and a different kind of sedimentary rock down below. Now, because of the fossils that are found in them, according to evolutionists, the top of the mountain is 1.5 billion years old. They say that this is Precambrian limestone. But it sits directly on top of this sedimentary rock below, which does contain fossils, but the fossils are different. And for that reason, they tell us that the layer down here is only 110 million years old. Anybody here got a problem with that? Now, I would like to teach you something really, really important. What are the two most important questions in science, which are also the two most important questions when you study the Bible? So I'm teaching you science, but this is a great Bible study technique. What are the two most important questions in science? Number one, what is there? Meaning that when I make an observation, I must adequately and accurately describe what is present, what is there. The second, more important question in science is, what is not there? And we'll learn more by asking the second question than the first. Let's apply these, again, it applies to Bible study. I can show you hundreds of examples where it applies to Bible study. However, please look at the mountain for just a moment. What's there? Well, according to evolutionists, the top layer is at 1.5 billion, the bottom's 110. That's what's there. Now, would you please tell me what's not there? No, what's there, but what's not there, but ought to be? Well, if the top layer is 1.5 billion and the bottom's 110, what's not there? Thank you very much. There's 1.4 billion missing in between. Is that correct? Yeah, so these are upside down or backwards according to evolution, and there's 1.4 billion years missing in between. Again, the technical term is bummer. Now, I'm going to ask you just 3 think questions. Please do respond if you would. All I'm trying to do is just get consensus, so don't worry about it. Would you agree with me? Number one, you cannot bend rock. Come on, if you try to bend rock, it's going to break, correct? Number two, however, you can bend mud. Is that correct? Right? As long as it's what's called plastic, but as long as it's wet, it's, you can bend mud, right? Sure. Third question, would you agree? Water, still water, seeks its own level. Is that correct? Yes. Right? Yes. Now, with that in mind, I'd like to take you to a rock formation at the Big Bend National Park in the state of Texas. Now, in Texas, we find this rock formation. Here you see approximately 35 layers of limestone layers, but would you agree with me, they are highly folded, is that correct? Yes. But they are not broken. The surface is weathered, but they're not broken. Now let's think, how did that happen? Well, let's think. The layers had to be laid down flat by water, and then while they were still wet, they had to be folded by tectonic forces, and only after they were folded, they dried out into hard rock. Is that correct? Correct. Right? Yes. Oh, well, let's take this example and move it up one step in magnitude. These are the very beautiful Calico Hills in Southern California, and of course, this is a parking lot. Remember, you must describe what's there. Now, here we see approximately 75 layers of sedimentary rock, dried out mud, and you will notice that they are indeed highly folded. Is that correct? Correct. Well, that's what's there. But now let's ask the question, what's not there. Think with me. If evolutionists say that these layers came about one at a time, slowly and gradually over long periods of time, then one layer should have been laid down, then another one laid down, then another one laid down, and that means that as each layer was laid down, it would be exposed for a certain amount of time before the next layer formed on top, correct? So please tell me, why are there no soil horizons between these layers? Why are there no V-shaped erosion marks? Because if rain falls on a layer, it will etch eventually a V-shaped erosion mark. Why are there no animal holes? Why are there no plant holes? Those four things are missing. That shows that these layers were all laid down at one time, flattened by water, then folded by tectonic forces, and only then dried out into hard rock. Agreed? Okay, apparently some of you don't like that particular rock. If you don't like that rock, how about these? Oh, I got your attention. This is a real place. This is a protected preserve area in Arizona called the Wave, affectionately. But here we see almost every single type of sedimentary deposition you can find in nature. Here we find layers that are alternating, very much folded, sheared here, sheared there. And this area right here is called cross-hatching. It can only form in nature with rapidly moving flood waters full of mud. That's the only way that forms in nature. But you got to admit, God does do good work, doesn't he? That's pretty. Oh, come on, that's really pretty. Well, let's take this up one more step in magnitude. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the French Alps near Grenoble, where the Winter Olympics were many, many years ago. But I would like you to take a look. I think even you'll agree by Tennessee standards, those are serious mountains. Come on, those are serious mountains, right? But I wondered if you happened to notice a layer of dried out mud laid down flat by water that starts here, folds up this mountain, down this mountain, and up this mountain. And by the way, for any of you that do farm, that's an entire farming village in their fields here. But do you see this layer going up, down, and up again? Yes. Well, that tells you that the French Alps are nothing but layers laid down flat by the flood, then folded and dried out into hard rock, even mountains. Is that correct? Yes. Oh. And you don't have to go to, well, you don't have to go to France, Germany, so forth to see these kind of layers. Let's just go west and north. Let's go to British Columbia for just a moment. The next photograph I'm going to show you is an official Canadian government photograph, taken at the top of the British Columbian Rockies. Now, I would like you to look at the next photograph, and please tell me, do you see any significant amount of folding at the top of the British Columbian Rockies? Anybody see any folding here? That's a glacier back there, but do you see any folding here? So that tells me the British Columbian Rockies are just flat mud layers laid down by the flood, then folded and dried out into hard rock. Is that correct? Oh. Now, I also promised those of you that were here on Monday night, do you remember I showed you my third all-time most favorite fossil, right? 48 hours, and they've already forgotten.
Not too impressed.
Do you not remember my teddy bearosaurus?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was my third most favorite fossil. But I promised if you would come tonight, I would show you my first and second most favorite fossil of all time. And so tonight I would like to show you the photograph of a fossil Fedorosaurus. Now, this Fedorosaurus was found in Tasmania, but it had fossilized in only 40 years. So is fossilization a rapid or a slow process? Oh, it's a rapid process. Although I noticed many of you did not react. Many of you didn't apparently like my favorite fossil. That's okay. I'm a big guy. I can take it. Maybe you would prefer this other. This is a Bolosaurus. Now, this Bolosaurus was found in New Zealand. It had fossilized in only 60 years. So is fossilization a rapid or a slow process? Oh, it's rapid. And not that far from where we are today. In 1803, at Eureka Springs, Arkansas, we found this complete whole bag, well, hello? Come on, folks, that's a fossil ham. That's a whole ham. Are y'all with me? And we found this, well, Flowerasaurus. This Flowerasaurus, I mean, this is the bag of flour. Notice you can still see the stitch marks and you can still see the burlap pattern in the stone. Is that correct? Yeah. So apparently this Hamosaurus and this Flowerasaurus were found behind a very old Cracker Barrel. And let's see what else we have found in the ground. Now, this is obviously a man-made stone mortar and pestle. It's obvious. That's not natural. That's man-made. And here we see more stone mortars and pestles that are obviously man-made. Is that correct? Correct. Yeah. And this is only part of over 300 man-made stone tools that were found in California during the California Gold Rush. Now, the Gold Rush was between 1850 and 1890. And here we see more man-made stone tools. But please notice, this comes from the fountain of all wisdom and knowledge, the University of California, Berkeley. Hello? Yeah, you see, we found over 300 man-made stone tools while they were looking for gold. They were digging in the mountains looking for gold. This is an area where I grew up. Here's the problem. Over 300 man-made stone tools found in California between 1850 and 1890 in a mountain. The problem is, according to evolutionists, the mountain is 9 to 55 million years old. Anybody got a problem with that? Yeah. And what about this Spoonosaurus? Now, this Spoonosaurus was found in medium-grade coal in Pennsylvania, 1937. But please notice that this is a highly evolved Spoonosaurus. It even has an enamel glaze. And what about this, well, small black iron pot? Now, it is of obvious human manufacture when you look at it. Is that correct? Yes. This was found in the state of Oklahoma in 1912. The problem is that this small black iron pot was found inside anthracite coal, supposedly more than 300 million years old. Anybody here got a problem with that? Yes. And you might really like this. How about this Dollysaurus? Hello? Now, we're not talking about Dollywood, by the way, but this Dollysaurus. Now, this is an obvious human figurine. Is that correct? Yes. It's actually fired clay. It's terracotta. But notice it has, the head, neck, nose, 2 eyes, a mouth, 2 arms, a torso, a leg and a half. I think it's human. How about you? Yep. But it's really quite small. It's only that big. Here you see it compared to a penny. It's really very small. But let's talk about where it was found. It's called the Nampa doll because it was found in the city of Nampa, Idaho, and the year was 1889. So in the summer of 1889, they wanted to drill a water well to provide water for the city of Nampa. The well, by the way, is still there. You can still see where it was found. But they put a drill rig down the ground. They drilled straight down 320 feet, and up out of the well popped that little doll. The problem, of course, is that 320 feet below the surface at Nampa, Idaho is, according to evolutionists, 12 million years old. Anybody got a problem with that? And what about this Hammersaurus? Now, I find this Hammersaurus to be quite interesting. If you look at the skull of the Hammersaurus, you'll see this little scratch right there. That's where we actually removed a little bit of the metal. We've assayed it. It is a form of almost pure soft steel. And the wood handle you see here, now it was broken before it was found, but the wood handle portion you see here is still wood. It's not petrified, it's not stone, it's wood. And you'll notice the little black area at the bottom, that is coal. A little bit of the wood has actually turned to coal, the rest of it is wood. Now, remember, evolutionists tell us how old things are by the fossil you find in the layer, correct? And we found a seashell here next to the skull of this Hammersaurus. And based upon finding this species of shell next to the skull of that Hammersaurus, evolutionists tell us that this Hammersaurus is more than 440 million years old. Anybody here got a problem with that? And the last fossil that I would like to show you tonight, I would like to introduce you to a friend we found not too long ago. Tonight I would like to introduce you to the limestone cowboy. Now, this is a fossil cowboy, We know he died approximately 1950. We know that because of the stitching and design on the boot. But he died and his body was fossilized. We accidentally found him in 1997. So please tell me, is fossilization a rapid or a slow process? It's rapid. Now I want to close tonight, turn this back over to Pastor Mike. But before I do, I'd like to make a couple of comments. I hope that you have gotten a lot out of the 6 sessions that we've done this week for you. There are many others we could, but we only had time for 6. But I hope you've really got a lot out of it. It was interesting to me. On Sunday, Pastor Mike and I did not coordinate on this, but he said, I'm an ammunition bearer. But that's actually a term I've used many, many times about myself. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just an ammunition bearer, but you're the ones that have to use it. So keep that in mind. But I want to show you why our 6 sessions together have been so critically important. Because if you don't realize the significance, why am I here? Why did I do these 6 sessions for you? Yes, I'm concerned about you, but I am deeply concerned about your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren. Amen. I want to share just 2 more slides with you. Please notice, this was from a study done in 1999, and they said, and I quote, 75% of all children raised in Christian homes who attend public schools will reject the Christian faith by their first year of college. You know, it's hard enough, particularly with public school, but it's hard enough to raise a child through 12 years of public school education and keep them Christians. That's hard enough. Yes. But think with me, what happens when you send them away to schools? And I don't care whether it's UT or any other place, Harvard, it makes no difference to me. Please tell me, when you send them off to college, did you hold their hand in their first class? I mean, you take them to these institutions and you drop them off in the dorm and you hug their neck and you kiss them goodbye and you say, make us proud. But do you hold their hand in the first class of their freshman year? Because it is no longer in the science classroom. Today, it's in art. It's in PE. Right. It's in history. Yes. Today, militant, atheistic professors are standing up in front of your children in their first class, regardless of the subject, and they're saying, if you believe in creation, you're an idiot. And we're going to spend 4 years proving to you that evolution is true. And because the children are not equipped with the ammunition to defend themselves, after even 1 year, 75% of them will be converted. We're losing 75% of our children to the world after only 1 year at a public institution. Now, that was 1999. However, I want to share one last slide with you. In 2006, and I think Barna, you're familiar with the Barna Group, Pastor knows what I'm talking about. Barna does really good demographic studies. And in 2006, Barna said it was then 80%. We're losing 80% of our children, grandchildren to the world after only 1 year in a public education. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you tonight, we cannot afford it. Did you hear that?
That's right.
We cannot afford to be losing 75 to 80% of our children to the world. This is why this is so critically important. Yes, I'm an ammunition bearer. Yes, I brought you the ammunition. The materials that are out there and so forth, they're not out there for my benefit. They're out there for your benefit. But if you don't arm yourself, if you don't arm them, I'm telling you, you're going to lose them. It's simply too important. Well, thank you for your attention. I really appreciate it. It's been a delightful week to be with you. Thank you, Pastor Mike.